Good day. It's a privilege to be with you. It is evident that we're living in a world of systemic crisis. And what I want to briefly address today is the challenges required to build a more sustainable pattern of industrial development to take us through the 21st century. I will make two main points. Firstly, business as usual. That is following the path which was successfully pursued by some countries over the last 2 decades is no longer possible. Secondly, we no longer want to catch up to an outdated model. We need to forge a model of development which is more inclusive, more equitable, and more environmentally sustainable. We have to go back in history to understand that this crisis we're experiencing is not unique. We've had similar occasions in the past which have surfaced in similar ways. So I need to begin first by taking us back in history, and then I need briefly to use that historical agenda to understand why business as usual is no longer possible. If we understand that business as usual is no longer possible, what are the opportunities? And these opportunities are opened up by a new paradigm, the digital paradigm. And from that, we can grasp opportunities to identify policies to create a more sustainable world. And of course, let's not forget, policies need to be implemented. To say something about implementation as well. So let's begin with a bit of history. Since the Industrial Revolution began in the early 18th century, the world economy has passed through 5 what we call techno-economic paradigms. These are long phases of growth between 5 and 8 decades. They tend to have an upswing when the technology is nascent, when it's extended, and then often associated with the crisis of overexuberance. Once the crisis is seen through, we have a period in which the new technology and the new paradigm is deployed through the system to create a more sustainable world. So briefly, what are the 5 paradigms we're talking about? The first one, beginning in the 1750s, was the introduction of the factory system aided by water power and canals. From about the 1830s, the new wave took over, which was a wave driven by steam power and railways, extending the market from the local to the national level, followed by the third wave from 1870 to 1920, which the introduction of iron and steel, steamships and telegraphy enabled the economy to move from the local, national to the global level. The 20th century was the era of mass production. Large-scale production, heavily concentrated plants, and increasingly production and consumption being separated. And in its logical extension, the extreme case is producing in China for consumption all over the world. Now, each of these waves, and these waves are systemic, they're not just around technology or the economy, they involve values, they involve social organization, they involve governance, and have an impact on their environment. After the initial introduction of the technology, we get this period of exuberance and we get the great crash. The tulip boom, the railway boom of the 19th century, the Great Depression of the 1920s and 1930s, and now confronting us in the future is the likelihood of a significant financial meltdown. And once that financial meltdown has worked its way through, we have the opportunity to move to a more sustainable world. And this is the world in which we have the 5th of these techno-economic paradigms. It's the paradigm driven by the digital era. So let's go to the issue of why business as usual is no longer possible. We have a problem on the trade front. Globalization is imploding, and the rules of global trade are in crisis. Number 2, we have a massive social and environmental crisis. Exclusion and precarity are evident and obvious all over the world. Just a small statistic, in Latin America, Africa, and parts of South Asia, outside of agriculture, more than 2/3 of the population earn their livelihoods in the informal sector. And yet the policies we bring to this agenda are policies designed to generate and extend the formal sector. This is a paradigm of exclusion, and not one of inclusion. The third reason why business as usual is no longer possible is because we have an accelerating environmental crisis, which is changing the rules of operation, of living, and migrants, people flows in dramatic ways. And then finally, just briefly, we have a changing geopolitical world with the growth of a new hegemon, China and perhaps India at some stage in the future, and the decline of the USA as the prime hegemon. So we've seen the history. We understand why business as usual is no longer possible. Let's talk about taking opportunities, going beyond business as usual. And the phrase we've used for this is beyond catch-up. It is no longer possible or indeed desirable to catch up to the old paradigm because it was a paradigm of exclusion and environmental damage. We have to move to a new paradigm, taking advantage of the new digital era. As I said earlier, each of the previous eras were driven by core technologies: water power, steam power, iron and steel, mass production. And at these periods, when the paradigm is exhausted, Schumpeter referred to them as creative destruction. The old is no longer possible, the destruction part. Creation, the taking opportunities with the new paradigm, is what's provides the opportunity for a more sustainable world. So the digital era, remember, this is not just an era of technology, but also of organization, involves technologies which are more flexible, technologies which produce new products, technologies which descale production, the technologies which displace the concentration of production and power, and technologies which involve changes in lifestyle and ways of living as well. We can see these opportunities in two particular respects. Renewable energy provides the opportunity to generate energy where you need it, and M-Pesa, digital money, provides for financial exclusion for the mass of the population. Both of these technologies, renewable energy and M-Pesa, are systemic technologies. They affect the way we live, the way we work, our values, and they are critically determined and made possible by the digital technology. So how do we turn these digital tech and the digital era into opportunity? And here's the challenge for UNIDO and the global governance system. Firstly, we have to prioritize the needs of the informal sector and the excluded. Our old instruments of industrial policy are predominantly focused on the formal sector and technologies which are not employment intensive. Secondly, second policy agenda, we have to develop and extend the deployment of the digital technologies right through the economic and the social system. We do that in part by driving the diffusion of technologies through a more and environmentally sustainable world. And as I've said, this is very evident in the case of renewable energy. We have to use these new technologies, these new ways of being and working, to make the most of commodities, so that the developing countries are no longer merely producers of unprocessed raw materials. Finally, we need to expand South-South trade. Global trade is increasingly becoming regional trade. South-South trade provides massive opportunities for the industrial sector. So how do we get there? We have to develop a policy framework which moves us beyond policy to implementation. We need vision and leadership from government. We need to develop mission-oriented policies so that we bring together parties from across the social policy terrain and the scientific and innovation capabilities. We need to use this to develop the coalition of the willing, to begin with niche innovations to show what is possible, and to use those innovations to extend them through the economic system so that the new paradigm becomes diffused and gives us a more sustainable world. Thank you very much. Good luck to UNIDO and to everyone in the audience.